enjoy the adventure. And it will be hard. You'll have friends that can do that homework faster and it will feel unfair. And it just, sometimes you're just like, why am I even doing this? And the reason why you're doing this is that there's so many amazing things to do with one's life. You gotta stick with it, because then you will find the path that you should be on, where the dyslexia actually benefits you in the work that you're doing.
I'm Nicole Holcomb, attorney by day and podcaster by night, a former educator, school counselor, and administrator, and mom to a 9-year-old daughter with dyslexia, who loves all things Harry Potter, Minecraft, and science. A few years ago, she was identified with dyslexia, and our life seemed to turn upside down for a while, quite literally. I created the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast to help you navigate the upside down journey of dyslexia. You got this. If you're wanting to thrive as a mom in this dyslexia journey, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast. You are listening to episode 27, Dyslexic Voices, and today I'm going to be having a conversation with Dr. Drennan. She is amazing. Let me just tell you that up front. She is a professor at MIT, but not only is she a professor, she also has dyslexia. And she is going to share with us her story today. And we're going to have a conversation about what it was like growing up dyslexic and how she overcame that. She still has dyslexia today, and she'll talk a little bit about that as well. But this is going to be so inspiring because at the end of the day, as I always say, this is a hard road. And although we know that there's going to be struggles along the way, Dr. Drennan is, just an amazing adult who was able to find what she was passionate about and create an amazing career around it. So I'm so excited to have Dr. Drennan on the show to provide inspiration and also, to share her personal journey. I think sometimes it helps to know that we're not alone on this journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation. All right. Today, I'm so excited to have Dr. Cathy Drennan with us on the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in this week. I know you're going to enjoy the conversation that we're going to have today. And I'm just so excited to get started. So I'm just going to jump right in and welcome Dr. Drennan. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Well, we just are excited to have you with us and to learn more about your journey. It's such an inspiration to moms and to students who are struggling through this as well, to have, inspirational stories. And I so appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to talk to us and talk with us about your own personal journey. Do you mind just starting off by sharing a little bit about yourself as far as what you do currently for a job or a little background before we get into your journey?
Sure. So I'm a professor at MIT, so in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I teach introductory biology to MIT undergraduates. And I also run a research group. So I have about 15 members of my lab, and we investigate the sort of atomic world, the molecular world, and try to figure out what protein molecules which are inside cells look like and how they function.
And how long have you been doing that work?
So I've been at MIT now for 21 years. So it's quite some time. And I've been teaching that whole time. I actually started teaching introductory chemistry, which I did for 14 years. And in the last 3 years, I've sort of switched over and I'm teaching introductory biology. So I love teaching freshmen, but the research we've been doing has been pretty constant over that 20-year time period.
Wow, that's amazing. So, and I know we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes about how you got there, but that's amazing. I'm excited to hear about that. And so you enjoy working with the freshmen though, as far as them just coming in and having a new perspective and getting to kind of get them excited about biology and chemistry, or what is it that you like about the freshmen?
Absolutely. The freshmen they're very excited. And MIT, I think, is a really special place for those of you who don't know about it. It's a school that's really focused on science and engineering. And students come from all over the country and all over the world. who are kind of, a little bit science geeks. It is an intimidating place to come to because you keep hearing about MIT, like, Tony Stark, Iron Man, supposedly graduated from there. And so all these superheroes, like, these genius kind of scientists or genius computer scientists. And so these freshmen arrive and they're like, well, for my high school, I was good in science, but I have no idea, how it's gonna play out. And so I really love teaching the freshmen and helping them see that they do belong at MIT. And some of them have really strong backgrounds and some of them not so much in terms of the strength of their background, but they're smart and interested and curious, are just fun. They're fun people. They sort of, they'll make fun of themselves a little and how geeky they are. And I just enjoy working with them so much, just being around smart people who check their egos at the door. There's sort of nothing better than that.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you this later, but it may make sense to ask you now. So for me, I do have a 9-year-old who's very interested in science and says she wants to be a chemist. And she actually said, I want to go to MIT right about the time that I ran across your work. And I was like, oh, this is amazing that it's the fate, puts us together. But I was just curious for those of us that do have young children who are, we'll get a little bit more in the dyslexia story in a few minutes, but, those that are struggling, but like math and science lights her up. Is there any words of wisdom you would say to kids who are just, they're struggling and they may not feel great about themselves, but they would love to go to an MIT, but they don't know if they're good enough, kind of what you were just saying. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are, besides myself, there are a number of faculty members at MIT who are dyslexic. So I am not the only one. And in terms of the in terms of the undergraduate population, there are a large number of students with dyslexia and other learning disabilities. And we make accommodations for that. So it is not that unusual. We have, I think being dyslexia often goes with abilities in science and math. And so just because you're diagnosed with, learning differently than other people, there's nothing to restrict where you can go and what you can do with your career.
Absolutely. And I always tell my daughter just to, follow your passion, because that's going to take them so much further than trying to shove themselves in a direction that they're not interested in, but they think that's how they should go. So I think it's so important for them to, to find that passion and lean into it even early on. So let's talk a little bit about your journey. If you don't mind sharing your journey with the moms and telling us more about, how this all started for you, if you'll kind of take us back to the beginning.
Yeah. So when I first started realizing that there was something different about me and how I learned was in first grade. That's where we had reading groups for the first time. And I was an only child. And so, my parents talked to me as if I was an adult. So I would come into first grade and I'd be aware of current events. And I gravitated toward adults. So I'd go up to the teacher and start asking them questions about what they thought was happening in the world. And I thought, okay, here's this smart kid. And so they put me in the top reading group and I couldn't read. And so they kind of bumped me down, like, okay, we thought she'd be in the summer, it's okay. We'll bump her down, and kept going. Got to the very, very bottom reading group. And I just could not learn how to read. And so, the teachers contacted my parents, and my mom features prominently in my personal story. She was one to figure out what was going on, because she said, I believe my daughter is smart. And so I don't understand why she's having so much trouble learning to read. And so my mom started researching it and asking people, and this was early enough and sort of long enough ago that schools weren't set up to look for or evaluate kind of learning disabilities the way that they are now. So my mom really did the homework, and she was able to get me diagnosed as dyslexic. And that's sort of so it was first grade when it began for me.
And so how did it go from there? Were you able to get tutoring, or were you able to get assistance? Because I I've watched some of your stories, so I know that there's a pivotal point in sixth grade where you kind of take on your own learning at that point. But talk to us about how you get from first grade to sixth grade, where you change the way you're approaching your own education.
Yeah. So my mom did set me up with tutoring. My mom actually, she went back to school to learn about learning disabilities. So she got a master's degree, but tutoring me herself was not going to work. I think it's, if you find another mom, maybe who has a child with dyslexia and you trade, because tutoring other people's kids is always better. I have a 12-year-old daughter right now. I keep trying to remind myself of that. So I had a tutor. I stayed in public school for second grade, but I just, there'd be these times in the school where there was a reading assignment and I just was looking at these pages and I'm like, I just can't do anything with this. And I would just sit there and watch the clock because I was completely unable to do the work that was in front of me. And it was very stressful. And so my parents experimented. They moved me to a private school for a while that was like an open classroom. And so there was much less pressure to be able to sort of do particular assignments at particular times. You had more flexibility of what things you wanted to do. But I wasn't really learning enough in that environment. So then they put me in another private school. And eventually I went back by seventh grade back to public school. So I kind of have experienced multiple environments. When I switched from this open classroom school to another school, I redid sixth grade. So, here I am as this MIT professor who was left back in school. And so, sometimes people ask like, oh, wow, you're a professor at MIT, you must be smart. And it's like, I don't know how to answer that question because most of the time, I feel like smart is not associated with people who are left back in school. But the second time through sixth grade, it just clicked. And I had, been constantly working. I loved books. I loved stories. I would read with my mom. She would read to me. I would read to her. I always liked it better when she read to me. But I loved stories and I kept working on it. And eventually I got to the point where I think I had memorized the shapes of enough words. I looked at the shape of a word and then I said, okay, that word means this and sounds like that. So I don't sound out words, I think the way that most people do. I have memorized the connection between shape, meaning, and sound. And so like if a word is broken up on a page, there's a dash, I have to kind of imagine the word put back together before I'll know what that word is. But I had gotten to the point where I had enough collective memories that of these shapes that all of a sudden I could read. So it was just like, it just clicked that repeating sixth grade, I was in the quote kind of remedial class, which of course the students refer to as the dumb people class because, kids can be sometimes not so nice. And then we moved locations, we moved our house and I went back to public school and no one in public school at that point knew that I was, a remedial kid and I had learned how to read. And so everyone was like, oh, she's the smart one. And that was sort of like, my brain was like, wait a minute, who am I? So it was this, just huge transition from being the kid in the remedial class to all of a sudden being the person being teased about being smart.
And I wanted to ask you a question about that too, kind of a follow-up question, which is, you had all these different experiences in school early on. So how did that impact how you felt about school? So you went from one extreme to the other. How did that impact you as a student?
I do think that it was impactful the way I think about teaching now and partly why I love being a teacher, because I feel like, the connecting to individual students and helping them with their journey. And everyone has something that is hard for them. Everyone does. I mean, some people, I think they don't find that kind of hard thing until later in life. They kind of cruise through. Sometimes, it's those students at MIT, they're like, oh, this is all easy. And then they get to MIT and they have one class and they're like, oh man, this is what people were talking about, like when they said things were hard. So everyone experiences that differently. And, having the courage to kind of get through whatever that thing is for you that is so hard. So I really do think about that. And the time in the sort of open classroom school, I think I realized about myself how much I did love learning. It wasn't that I didn't love learning. I just couldn't read, but I loved information. And I had a friend, she's still a friend of mine, Amanda. I had decided that the teachers didn't assign us enough math. And I liked math. Math was fun. It was like puzzles. Like why would you not want to do this all the time? This was really fun. And so I would assign her math homework because I didn't think the teachers were doing a good enough job. And so it's amazing she stayed friends with me. What kind of person has a friend who assigns them homework? And so I think that, people look back, and I made this kind of grand discovery about myself sometime through college that I wanted to be a teacher. And everyone was like, pretended to be shocked, like, really, you a teacher? We never thought that you would be a teacher. The person assigning homework to their friends in second grade. It's like, this is clearly my destiny all along. So yeah, all of these experiences were shaped by our experiences, the good and the bad one. And it's sort of what we take away from those experiences is what makes us who we are. We can't avoid bad stuff happening to us, but we can handle what we do about it.
Right. And that's the two things. So my background also is I used to be a school counselor, and I would always tell, the students, and I tell the families I work with now that, you can't control others, but you can control how you react and what you do with that. And the other piece you had just spoken to that I think really is at the center of a lot of the work I do with families and with moms is that relationships are so important. Like the relationships at home, the relationships that you do have with some teachers. Like you said, there are good and bad experiences, but those relationships play such a large role in who we become and how we react to things. And it sounds like you feel that way too, as far as how you work with your students, that relationship piece, because we know they're going to work so much harder if they have interest in it. And then they see that you have interest and passion in it. And then you're able to connect with the student on a different.
Absolutely. I agree. Relationships are so important. Having a support system, both by teachers, parents, siblings, friends, all of those relationships are so important. And I think, just even one teacher who really believes at you just at the right stage of your career can have an enormous impact. And sometimes I get emails from teachers saying, I've been counseling a student, or I'm teaching a student with dyslexia, and, they're interested in science. What should I tell them? And, kind of wanting reassurance that this student that they care about is going to be okay. And a lot of times, I respond about my story and I say, if this student has you in their corner and that you're taking your time out to email me and get advice, that person's going to be just fine, because it's not, you don't have to change the world for people. You just have to be there and support them. And a lot of times it is the personal journey that they're making. I was learning how to read on my own, but I needed to keep going. I needed people to believe in me. And that was so critical. They didn't have to figure out some magic way for me to read. They just had to encourage me that I could do this. And that is so critical to have that support.
Yes. And I appreciate you sharing that story too, because I know, there's many times I get emails or I get, direct messages on social and things like that where moms are reaching out and they're just struggling. And I know it's not easy, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, these school years are some of the toughest that I know my daughter will have to go through. And I'm sure you can share that as well from your perspective. But I tell them the fact that you're reaching out, the fact that you're listening to the podcast, the fact that you're seeking information, you're already on the right path, right? You're already on the right path. Yeah. You're doing everything you
Absolutely.
Obviously care a lot about your child. And I know, some of the reading, the research and things I read were saying that, the child's not going to remember that you sat down and did second grade math work, but what they will remember is that you sat with them and that you were there with them, and those relationships going into, because we want to have good relationships as our children grow up and become adults. And so, we have to be mindful about how we respond as well. But I do think relationships, like you were saying, in school and at home are just, so crucial. Speaking of relationships, I recall when I watched your TED Talk, you were talking about, your experience in college, and you kind of went on your own. You said, I'm going to do this. I'm not really going to tell a lot of people about my dyslexia. But then you ran into a gentleman when you were getting ready to take your graduate exam, as far as, like a graduate placement to get into an entrance. Well, let me go back. You were taking the GRE?
Yeah, GRE, the graduate record exams. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm taking it, but I obviously completely lost my mind for a moment. So when you were preparing to take your graduate entrance exams, because you had decided, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to go to grad school, you met a gentleman that was quite interesting that was part of that process. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah. So during college, I was very insecure about letting people know about my dyslexia, because I didn't want people to say, oh, she's good for a dyslexic person. I just wanted to be, she's good. She's a good student. She's a good chemist. And I encourage everyone that if you can get extra time and things like that, you should take it. I think there's much less of a stigma, and it's so much harder not to do those things. But anyway, I was not mature enough. I admit that. But then when I was going to apply to grad school, I just felt like on the standardized tests, I just could not compete at the right level. So either, I was going to have trouble getting into grad school because my test scores were bad, or I was going to have trouble because my test scores would be okay, but it would be flagged that I got extra time because I was dyslexic. And I decided, partly because I was teaching high school at the time, that I was encouraging all my students to not hide disabilities, just say, this is who I am. That I was like, okay, I have to be well behaved now and say, I am dyslexic, and what that meant. So I did that. I was going to take it over the summer. I was teaching high school during the year, so summer was a good time to take the exams and prepare for them. And I was also a summer camp counselor at the time. So I was in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, and I had to look up where there was a college that I could take the exams near the summer camp and get a day off. And so I went into this college, and there was a professor who was getting paid extra to proctor me. I was the only person with extra time. I don't think there were many people there, period, but I was definitely the only one with extra time. And so he came in, he was chatting with me first, and he was trying to be really nice. He said, you shouldn't get too discouraged. He said, I don't know anyone, who's dyslexic who is in grad school, but, there might be a grad school that might take you. It's possible. You shouldn't be too discouraged. He said, there might be a program for a person like you. And this is sort of the first time that it's like, a person like me? Like, what is it, a person like me? And at the time, I kind of nodded my head, but I was thinking to myself, I'm going to go to a really good grad school and I'm going to do really well. And I really wish I had asked his name and sent him a little letter, like maybe when I got my job at MIT, and sent him a little letter and goes, this is what happens with people like me.
Thank you for sharing that story, because I know that there's still, even bumps in the road as we grow and we get older and we're still in college or grad school or jobs. It's still bumps in the road, right? As far as what people understand about dyslexia and what it really means. And so I appreciate you sharing that story. So after you finished that exam and went on to graduate school, you ran into some incredible women that you worked with, and again, built some really amazing relationships that, if I believe I remember correctly, that led to MIT. Could you share a little bit about that story?
Yes. So, I was applying to graduate school from teaching high school. And so I applied to places kind of that I could get to visit in a short amount of time and come back. And when I went to the University of Michigan to visit, I met Martha Ludwig, who I ended up working for in grad school. And I just met her, and I felt like this is someone who I could learn a lot from. It just felt, she just talked to me as if she was talking to a peer. And I just felt like the sort of mutual respect that was there. and that she would care about me and care about my future. And that just seemed, and she was sort of the only one doing research in the area that I was interested in at the university at the time. And, we all tell people about picking grad school, like make sure there's at least 3 faculty members that you want to work for before you decide to go there, because you might not get your first choice. So I did not do that. I was just like, met her and said, I want to work for Martha Ludwig. That's what I wanted to do. And I went to Michigan, very lucky. She took me into her lab, and I was really right about that. And, I tell everyone, life is hard enough. Work for nice people, work for people who are going to support you and care for you. And, some people at the time said, well, she was a little bit older and, her research program maybe wasn't viewed as the most cutting edge at the time. And I was like, no, I'm going to learn from her and I'm going to have a good experience. And that's what's important to me. And the work I ended up doing in her lab got a high profile paper, which got me a high profile talk, which got me invited to interview at MIT. I didn't actually apply. I mean, what kind of crazy dyslexic person would apply for a job at MIT? They invited me to apply, and I just thought, oh, this will be fun. I'll interview at MIT. They'll never hire me, but I can tell everyone about the day I interviewed for a faculty position at MIT. It'll be a great story. But then they did offer me a job, and I have been there ever since. So, it was just the most wonderful career path I could have taken, but I chose it because I felt like I will have a good time in this lab. I will learn a lot and I'll do good work. And that's really what's important, to have that positive experience, to be supported. Yeah, absolutely. That was a great choice on my part. And she has since passed away of colon cancer, but working with her was just absolutely amazing. And I also got to know the collaborator, Rowena Matthews, just an incredible role model as well. So I had these 2 amazing women who really helped mentor me and get me to the point where I was ready to be a professor.
Wow. And again, it seems like the theme of the day is relationships, because, as you seek, even like you were saying, seeking out those people, you may run across them in your life, but you made a point of actually seeking them out as well to further your interest. And so that's really amazing and I think an inspiration for people to be thinking about. You don't just have to wait to bump into these people. You can actually reach out and make things happen, or choose programs where you're exposed to, maybe it's a summer camp or whatever that's got an amazing program or particular people that you want to be around. So that's a very timely story. So I appreciate you sharing that with us as well. So as I think about, so many people that reach out to me, their children really are struggling. And they're really struggling with how to best help them, and their self-esteem is low. And they say, I know y'all say it's a gift to be dyslexic, but it doesn't feel like a gift right now. And so let's start there first. What advice would you give to students? You gave a little bit earlier about, if you're passionate about math and science, but what if I'm just I find out I'm dyslexic and I don't really know, I just want to give up. What type of advice have you provided to, to students in the past, or what would you provide today as far as just, something to be thinking about? Because it sounds like for you, you didn't start out in first grade saying, I'm going to go work at MIT, right? That just developed as your love of science and math developed, and you just had an incredible opportunity. And now you've been there 20 plus years. So that's amazing. So what advice would you give to students? Let's say like K through 12, what would you give as far as just, just advice in general on following their heart and following their passions and not giving up?
Yeah, a number of people with dyslexic like math and science, but not everyone. And I've met people with dyslexia who are artists, who are politicians, who are historians. There's a wide variety of professions that people seek out. And yeah, finding your passion and trying new things. And you never really know what experiences are going to be the most informative about where you belong. And I learned so much from being a summer camp counselor. And I sort of feel like everyone should do that at some point in their life. It's a really good experience. And it's yeah, the journeys that people have, and there isn't sort of one journey. And I think this is an important thing to recognize, because you might be slower at some parts of the journey, or have to repeat a grade and you feel like, I'm not on that trajectory to success. And people assume that someone who is very successful in their profession is probably successful at every single stage of that. They always got A's in school, and they always got the fellowship, and they always got this, and they always got that. But we see so many examples where that is not true. And we can see them in sports too, where someone is like, a famous quarterback professionally who wasn't even a starter on their high school team. The people's paths are different. There's not one path to success. And if you're a little bit different in the way you learn, and the way you do things, it doesn't rule you out. You're just on a different path, and your path will, may end up taking you to a place that you want to go from early on, or it might go somewhere else. I mean, when I was in high school, I was very interested in science, but I also loved theater. I loved acting, and I went to Vassar College, partly because they had a good theater program. And I also thought science was cool, and biology. I did not like chemistry, actually, out of high school, did not like it. And, I am a chemistry professor now, taught chemistry for 14 years, did not like chemistry, complained bitterly when they told me I had to take chemistry. And then when I took it in college, I fell in love with it. I also took a lot of theater classes in college. And so, if you had asked me when I was studying theater at Vassar College, did I think I was going to be a chemistry professor at MIT? You just have no idea where life is going to take you. And so just have a good time, learn things, engage, do things that are of value. It's so important, and there's so much going on that's bad in the world right now, to be thinking about, how am I going to contribute to making the world a better place? Being around people who will support you, and doing interesting and important work, and just follow that path, follow the adventure. Your life's an adventure. There is no statistics for someone like you. You are like you, and you are the only one. So you can make whatever statistic for yourself that you want to make, and find that passion. And it may come now in high school and elementary school and middle school. It might not be to college till someone forces you to take a class that you do not want to take. Then you'll be like, oh, okay, this is now the path that I'm on. So yeah, enjoy the adventure, and it will be hard. It will be harder, and you will have friends. You'll have friends that can do that homework faster, and it will feel unfair. And it just, sometimes you're just like, why am I even doing this? And the reason why you're doing this is that there's so many amazing things to do with one's life. And you just stick with it until you find how to get around it, until you turn something that can be a disadvantage. Let's be honest, it's a disadvantage. But you got to stick with it, because then you will find the path that you should be on, where the dyslexia actually benefits you in the work that you're doing, where learning how to cope with it is what makes you special. So get through that rough time, because let me tell you, it gets so much better, so much better.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to switch gears, and let me ask you this follow-up question, which is, for our moms out there that are listening, who are right there, in the struggle with their child, wanting to do everything that they can, what advice would you give to moms who are raising children with dyslexia?
To believe that your child is capable of doing amazing things, and that you can't fix everything for them, even though you want to. And as a mom, I can tell you how much I just want to jump in there and make it all better and fix the situation. One can't do that. You can only be supportive and caring and believe. And if the child knows how much the parents believe in their ability, that matters a lot. So you just have to be patient and supportive. And it is so hard. It's so hard not to be able to just fix things. But that you just have to stand back and be supportive and be there and love. That's what you have to do, and you just keep at it. Patience. I feel you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let me ask you a question, which is, what is and that doesn't have to be dyslexia focused, but what's the best advice you've received as a mom?
So one thing that's a little different about my situation, so I became a mom through adoption, and it's very interesting to me. Like the sort of first time I went to pick my daughter up and she was playing dodgeball. I think I like broke out into a sweat going, the trauma of me, the geeky kid. I was always like, they were always throwing the dodgeballs at me. And I was terrible at sports. I'd be like the last kid picked for any sport thing in school. It was always like, oh, who has to have Cathy on their team? And so I showed up to pick her up, and there was dodgeball going, and I just wanted to pull her out and go, it's going to be okay. I'm so sorry. There was dodgeball. I'm so sorry. And she just came running. She says, I don't want to leave yet. We're playing dodgeball. It's my favorite. And I just thought, partly because, she has different genes than I do. I was like, oh, maybe she's good at dodgeball. Like maybe she's the kid that's not going to be picked last. And I realized that, we're not clones of each other, parents and kids. So people who, is their biological child, you don't really know what they're going to be good with on and what they're going to struggle with. And to not impose your fears on them and what they think they can do. Because I've seen this sometimes where it's like, oh, don't sign up for sports. That's highly traumatic, right? You'll be picked last. It's like, no, your kid might be picked first. You don't know that. Let them go. Don't warn them that this might be terrible. Let them figure out whether they like it on their own. So I think that's really good parenting advice. Sometimes to stand back and say, don't place your fears on your children. Let them figure out the world and stand back. Be there to be supportive if they are picked last, but let them adventure. Let them be bold enough to adventure out there, and they may discover things that you never thought that anyone related to you might like.
I think that's a great advice. I appreciate that. Well, Cathy, I have so enjoyed talking with you today. I'm so honored that you took some time out of your day to be with us. And thank you so much for, just being open and sharing your journey with so many. And it really does make such an impact for moms to be able to share stories with their children and to be able to share success stories, because I think those are the things that get us through the day. And, it continues to be hard even as adult, I'm sure, but, just the fact that you keep going every day and you're, following your passion and you're loving what you're doing. And that to me is all we could ever wish for our kids, is for them to find what they're passionate about and to follow their heart and enjoy what they're doing. And so I can see that in you, that you're, absolutely, after 20 plus years at MIT, that you're still enjoying the work. And I just appreciate, that, there's some that don't want to speak out. And so I do appreciate that you're willing to do that and have a voice in the journey and to, and just to share your advice with us. So we so appreciate that. And thank you again.
Well, thank you for organizing this interview, and also for having this podcast. I think it is so important to hear from other people who are going through similar things. And so thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you. And just one last thing. I know so often people will say, I just feel so alone in this journey, even with all the resources out there. So again, I think that's why it's so important to be able to hear voices of real people saying, this is my experience. And although everybody does have a unique path, no matter what path anyone's on, it's all unique, that don't give up on us, don't give up on your kids. And so I do appreciate you taking time to talk with us. So thank you for that.
Thank you again.
Thank you for listening. I enjoyed our conversation a lot, and I'm so glad that you were able to hear all the wonderful things that Dr. Drennan shared with us today. So if you would like to get today's show notes, please go over to dyslexiamomlife.com/episode 27. That's 27. And also, if you enjoyed today's show, I'd love for you just to stop where you are. Hopefully you're not driving. But when you get to your destination, if you don't mind, I'd love for you to share this episode. There should be a link in wherever you listen to your podcast that will allow you to share an episode out on social media, through email, however you see fit. But I would love for you to share this episode or any other episodes that you really enjoyed and that you would love to share with your family and your friends. Hey, maybe even your spouse. So I appreciate it. Take care. And I'll be right back here next Monday to walk right along the journey with you. Remember, have a great week and you got this.